Hi folks, today's video is going to be about replacing the pads and discs on a Toyota Yaris. So the first step is to jack up the car, put it on axle stands, make sure it's safe and secure, remove the wheels and then remove the caliper guide pin bolts from either side of the car. Unfortunately I accidentally deleted the first video that I made, so I missed the beginning piece, but in this segment where you're joining me now, you can see I've already removed the bolt from the bottom of the caliper where the guide pin is, and now I'm trying to remove the top bolt. So in order to do that you need a 14mm socket piece and a 14mm spanner. Put the spanner on the nut that's on the other side of the guide pin in order to stop the bolt from spinning round, hold it in place, and then use a socket or a breaker bar in order to get that bolt loose. Quite often you'll find, as I'm finding here now when I was doing it, that the bolt is seized in place. Depends how badly it's seized. You might be able to get away with it just using your socket. Like I said, you may need a breaker bar. I think eventually I gave in and used my impact driver to get that off. Once you've loosened those bolts, take them out of the way, and then what you're going to want to do is to remove the caliper, pull it away from the disc there, and you can see that it's basically just held in place by, well, there's just one attachment left to it, which is the brake line. You don't want to let the caliper just hang there off the floor with all the weight on the brake line. So what I've done is put it up there against the suspension, let it hang there. However, don't do what I did, which is just leave it at that. You really need to want to tie it together with some string or with some bungee cord against the suspension to stop it from falling off. What that's going to do once it's out of the way is give you a chance to inspect the brake pads and the caliper bracket there as well. So the next step is to get the brake pads out of the way and remove the caliper bracket. Once you've moved the brake pads out of the way, you then need to get the caliper bracket off. So there's two 17mm bolts behind the just at the back side of the bracket there. So just switch the position of the camera to show you, and I'm tapping the two bolts there. So that's what needs to be removed next. So these bolts are a bit of a pig to get out. Like I said, the bottom one came off easily enough, but the top one I had to go and reach for my impact driver. Had my impact driver on the highest setting of 400 Nm and it didn't budge at all. So it took a combination of using a really brilliant penetrant that I've got called Aerocoil. I can put a link in the description at some stage. It is fantastic. It's got me out of many tricky situations and seized bolts. So leaving the Aerocoil on there for some time and then using the impact driver is eventually what got this bolt out of there. And that's what you can see me doing now, is finally removing that. So once the two bolts are out of place, you're then ready to lift the caliper bracket away from the brake disc. Alright, fairly typical, the brake disc was seized in place. What you can see me doing here now is using a couple of M8 bolts. So the discs on the Yaris have two holes that you can see, especially for this reason. So the M8 bolts go into those holes, and what you're meant to do is just tighten them evenly, one at a time, until you hear the disc pop. That popping noise is essentially it becoming free from the hub, and then you can just pull it off. There's absolutely no need to hammer away at all. At this stage you can basically go ahead and replace the discs and pads, or you can repeat the process on the other side of the car first, which is what I chose to do. The reason I did that is because you don't want to be in a position where you pull the discs off on one side but you can't get it off on the other side and you've already replaced it. You need to have the same happening on both sides basically. So that's why I chose to do the other side first, make sure I could get the disc off and then replace them together as a set. Again, I missed a bit of video here, but you can see me reaching for the impact driver again for the top bolt. Essentially, the air recoil and the impact driver again didn't work, so I had to go buy myself a breaker bar, which is what you can see here now. Use the breaker bar to finally get that bolt free. Even 400 Newton meters of torque from the impact driver wasn't enough. I actually made a mistake here, and you'll see me correct it in a second. I should have cleaned the brake pad, guide pins and the caliper bracket before I refitted it. So, really that's the 10th step, but whatever you prefer to do. What you'll see me do in a second is take this back off and start to clean it out, because obviously you want clean mating surfaces for the brake pads when you refit them, so make sure you clean it first. Again, here's where I'd say, learn from my mistakes and do things in a slightly different sequence. Obviously, I've already put the new disc onto the hub, and now I'm cleaning the caliper and the piston. But really what that means is all the brake dust is falling back down onto the new disc that I've just cleaned. So in a second you'll see me reach for the brake cleaner spray and clean it all over again. It's a bit of a waste of time, not an issue as such, but you might want to pick a more efficient way of doing things yourself. Once you've applied the copper grease to the brake pad, all you need to do is just get it the right orientation and guide it into the bracket slots and push it firmly into place. And you can see at the top of the brake pad there's like a metal piece that's sticking out. That's the built-in wear indicator, and that also helps you understand whether you're fitting the brake pad on the right side or not. So then repeat for the brake pad on the other side of the disc and reinstall. What you'll find when you go to reinstall the caliper is that the brake piston within the caliper is in its original position from when you had the previous pads fitted. So what you'll find, and you'll see me trying this just to illustrate the point, is that the caliper actually won't go back into place. What you need to do next is use a piston winding tool to push the piston back to its kind of zero setting as far back as it will go before you can refit the caliper onto the brake pads there. Apologies for the bad camera angle, I suppose I just forgot that this was out of shot, but what you can see me doing there is using the winding mechanism. It's the first time I'm using it, so I was a little bit unsure what to do. It's actually quite straightforward. All you need to do is make sure that you get the initial position correct of the kind of the circular metal piece that mates with the piston, because if you don't get that kind of perfectly level, it just makes the job a lot harder. So you'll see me fiddling around with it in a second to make sure I've got the correct angle on it. The reason as well that I've put there to remove the cap from the brake fluid reservoir first is because by pushing the piston back, you're essentially forcing hydraulic fluid, or brake fluid I should say, back into the system. What you don't want to do is create a back pressure. So you need to make sure that you've lifted the cap off the reservoir to allow the brake fluid to move back up. Keep an eye on it. I had some paper towels and some microfibers that I put underneath the brake fluid reservoir to stop it dripping and falling everywhere, because it's really damaging to paintwork. and obviously you don't want that happening in the engine bay. So yeah, make sure you do that. Keep an eye on it as well. You don't want it overflowing or overspilling. If you're starting to see that's going to happen, then remove some of the brake fluid first using whatever kind of extracting tool or turkey baster that you've got to hand. So just brought the camera up here to show you the brake fluid level. You can see how much it goes up by. Unfortunately, at this stage my phone ran out of storage, but really what you need to do is just repeat on the other side, tighten the bolts, refit the wheel, then pump the brakes to return the piston to its correct position, and pretty much that's it. Job done. Make sure you test drive it, make any adjustments that you need, and I hope that was helpful for you.